Everybody will call the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. And let me quickly start with our board norms, which are maintain our focus, communicate respectfully, be present, keep the board productive and effective, and respect the agenda. All right, and do we have any changes to the agenda? Not a change, but less, as we were just talking about, are we prepared to potentially flip-flop and go with the community feedback first? Or
Sure, yeah, we can do that, and we may just want to fill in a couple of things
when they
afterwards.
arrive.
And,
Okay.
you know, we'll need Bill here for part of this too, is Bill. Yep, he's here with us.
Perfect.
Okay, and
All
I
right.
see Luella.
Great. Yeah, before we get to that, I'll run through the other performance stuff. All right, correspondence. I don't think we had any, although we've had lots of feedback, but no correspondence per se. Members of the public, if there's anything that you do not see on the agenda that you'd like to speak to, we can perhaps address that now. If not, we'll address it when we get to it on the agenda.
Peter has his hand up.
Peter.
Thank you. Could you name everyone present in the room? This is a difficulty with videos.
Sure. Actually, yeah, so we've got Les. Can you can see though, right?
Well, yes, but not that well, and I'm not the only person that would be concerned with that later on.
Just have everybody introduce themselves.
Okay, yeah, all right, let's go around the horn.
All right.
Ken McFadden, Newfane.
Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
Bob Tebow, Principal, Leland and Gray.
Mike Foley.
Al Clausen.
Peter Hazelton.
Lindsay Bertram. Crystal Corview.
Dana West.
Les Edmondson.
Does he need a public?
Do you want the public?
Yeah, really. Public too?
I missed one just before Dana.
Crystal
Crystal.
Corview.
Oh, hi. Okay, thanks.
It's because you're so small.
So, yeah, we're not.
Yeah, sure, let's go around with our vote. Go ahead. You don't have to, unless you speak later on.
Maggie Bills.
There we
Townsend.
go, all right, thank you. The ones
All
that
right,
don't.
Danielle Witham.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you, appreciate it.
Peer pressure.
All right, well, there we go. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 6.
So moved.
2022. I have a second.
I'll second, but I got, maybe you guys can clarify this for me. On page 3, it says, Mr. West responded Jamaica would be given the opportunity if they wished. If they wish to what?
To leave the district.
Whereabouts?
Yeah, but
Page 3, first paragraph.
does anybody remember me saying that?
I don't remember you saying that.
Something with Renee. Renee asked if there's a possibility Jamaica would be offered the vote or decision to leave the school district. And then it states, Mr. West responded, Jamaica would be given the opportunity if they wish. I don't recall.
Maybe you said should?
Maybe we just strike that as a.
I can't imagine me saying that.
I can imagine me saying that.
I'm trying to wrap my head around you saying it, Ken, and I'm like, if they wish.
We could note it as a question and somebody could always go check the video.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, yeah, we could check the video.
I'll be happy to do that or strike it if it's not really important.
Strike it.
Thank you,
Not
Peter.
really important, Peter.
We'll strike it then. Thank you, sir. Anything else? That you saw, Dan, or anybody? Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Say aye.
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 We got a thumbs up from Joe.
Emily's on there too.
Emily's got a thumbs
Emily,
up.
all right. Okay.
Sarah on there?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, it's us, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. All right, anybody not approve? No? All right. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks, folks. All right, so as we talked about, unless Greg has shown up, nope. We're gonna flip-flop. We're gonna go with the community feedback for meetings and online board discussion first, and then we'll get to facilities report. Les?
Great, so Bob, if you could share that presentation on the screen.
So I'm gonna be sharing my own screen, which is kind of weird, but I think it's the only way for me to still see what's happening on Zoom. Okay.
That's a beautiful mountain.
It looks
Oh,
like
hey,
a
look at
Bob
that.
Ross painting.
Thank you.
Yep.
So following the last LTP meeting, Fiona Chevalier and Luella Stratton have organized 2 community meetings in Newbrook and in Jamaica, at Jamaica Valley School, to share those reports and get feedback from community members. And Suzanne Paugh created a Padlet document so that data from that meeting and additional community members could respond and weigh in with some thoughts, opinions, questions, and vote on some of the options that had been presented to the board in June. And we're going to walk through that data with you this evening. And just please keep in mind that this was rather hastily arranged because we wanted to try to set these meetings up while families were still relatively available before people dispersed for the summer. The information that is now in the Padlet that we'll discuss tonight should be taken in the context of all of the work that you've been considering up to this point. You know, all of the previous work of the Long Range Planning Committee, the work that we began with the Futures Protocol and the visioning process, the work of the task forces, and the reports that they presented, the financial information that Lori Garland presented to you. And I think the sum total of all this is that there's a growing public understanding of what some of the key issues and concerns are that surround this decision-making process. So let's step into this a bit and see what we found. So are we in presentation mode there, Bob?
You are, yep.
My tool doesn't seem to be working. Are you plugged
It is little lights blinking on
plugged in
it.
there? Maybe you'll just need to advance those slides for us. So Luella, could you give us a little bit of context about the meetings themselves?
Sure. So we had a meeting at Newbrook Saturday morning we had about 6 participants and 2 board members were present, and we had a pretty great discussion. The focus seemed mainly to be around what we can do to make our community better. That was a big topic. And you know, we went through the presentations as we just said we would. We shared both presentations and took comments and questions, and all of the responses from those participants are recorded in the Padlet that Suzanne put together. So that was the Newbrook meeting. And then the following Monday, we did one at Jamaica in the evening. And we only had 11 surveys completed, but I think it was like 13 or 14 participants. And then there were 4 board members at that meeting. Same format. We went through the presentations, took questions, comments, etc., and captured all of those comments on paper, which are now transcribed into the Padlet. And that conversation ended up steering more to about Jamaica and the town and how they were considering other options for their town. So that was that conversation there. There definitely seemed to be a lot more comments about the quality of the high school at that meeting than there were at the other meeting. And I think that had to do with, I'm in a meeting right now. Please ask your dad. Ask your dad. Sorry, 6-year-old. And yeah, so yeah, because of the participants at Newbrook tended to be more elementary aged students. So no experience with Leland and Gray. So that's the basic overview. Really great meetings. I think there was a positive feeling at both of them. And I think, again, with more notice and more communication efforts, we maybe could have gotten more people there, but it's tricky in the summertime. So that's what I've got for you.
Well, but you got everything off to a great start, and thank you for all of the work you put in to doing that. As Luella mentioned, the information that was being generated in those conversations was captured on charts. Those charts then found their way to Suzanne Paw, who entered that data on Padlet. So Suzanne, could you walk us through the Padlet and sort of what it is and what it has and how you went from there to here? And Bob, you could move us forward.
Okay, so hi everybody. So if you don't know what a Padlet is, it's basically an online collaborative platform where people can share content. This one specifically was just commenting content, but in general, you can share all sorts of things. It's kind of like a bulletin board. And the link is there on this slide, but I'm just going to kind of move through here because I know the board already looked at it. But basically the goals were to allow everyone to anonymously make comments, observations, ask questions, and provide feedback having to do with the elementary and secondary task force reports. And allow contributors, different than a Google form, we wanted contributors to be able to engage collaboratively so that they could like what someone else was saying, so that we could kind of get a sense of, oh, a lot of people feel this way. And they're kind of like, raising their hand saying, yeah, we feel that way as well. And then you could also, as a contributor, kind of observe trends and thinking and questioning in real time. So there was no moderation. I didn't get the comments before they went on. It was kind of a live stream situation. And the second part to it, which was started in the community meetings, was the demographic data, so that we could really understand who is engaging in this input. And I will say that from what I saw, not everyone filled that out on the Padlet. Some people chose not to answer any of them. Some people chose to answer only a couple of those questions. So when you look at that data, just know that not every single person that contributed may have answered every single one of those questions. They didn't have to. And then the last part, which will come later, and we'll discuss that a little later, is to allow board members to review and then to respond to questions and comments. And how do we move forward with that so that the community sees that engagement happening, that back and forth going on. So distribution was tricky because we were right at the end of the school year. Everyone was busy. The work was being done in the community meetings, and I wanted to kind of wait until that happened to have Fiona and Luella kind of guide me on how will this Padlet kind of come together based on what you experienced. So I quickly put the Padlet together after their meetings, and then we distributed it to principals to send out to school communities. They were on retreat. It was kind of hard to get everybody to send it out, but essentially it all got out between the 29th of June and the 6th of July. It was also sent out through Facebook and Front Porch Forum. And so as of July 8th, 33 people contributed to the Padlet. And that's more now. I think it's up to 42 maybe when I last checked, but I did this a few days ago. And then 17 participants from the meetings, and all that information is now on the Padlet. So a total of 50 contributors.
And thank you
Go to
for,
the next slide, unless anyone has questions on that first one.
well, just wanted to mention that also I wanted to thank you for preparing that flyer that some of our board members then went and distributed at various locations around the town. So I think we're able to reach a few more people
Right.
from that, and it did seem as if there was some higher use of the Padlet in the last couple of days. So
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it was that flyer or what, who knows? I mean, but that's good data. And maybe it was the flyer. So
whatever it was is very encouraging.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so the demographic data from the Padlet and the community meetings. So I was unable to actually input all that data from the community meetings because I couldn't personally like triple and quadruple like things because that's how you were going to be answering questions. So this is really where that data comes from. So if you look at the Padlet, it won't be quite the same. I had to kind of add things on and do a little mental math there. But essentially, people kind of told us where they're coming from, how they're connected to the school. So you can see kind of pretty spread out, pretty even across the way in terms of schools represented, community members, I guess a fairly large amount of private school respondents. And then they just told us where they lived and their household income and their household education. So down on those bottom 3 boxes, you'll see where that all played out. And again, this is from July 8th, so things could be slightly different since then.
You have a hand
We
up.
can take a nice look at that.
Fiona has a hand up.
Yeah, Fiona, please jump in.
Oh, one thing I wanted to add is that about the Padlet itself is that we are going to be keeping this open throughout the entire process. I'm thinking less until the September meeting, and that each meeting we would update you as to if any more information has come in, because we wanted to give people enough time to be able to add their 2 cents.
So glad you were able to join us earlier here, Fiona. Bob, if we can move to the next slide. So one of the questions for the board.
Sorry, Maggie, you have a question?
And I assume this is the Padlet that you're talking about. Rick Hagee had a link and I couldn't get on, and Facebook had a link and I couldn't get on, and everywhere had a link and I couldn't get on. Just saying. It was real difficult to access.
I think you have to download the app.
You do, from a mobile device. There was a note in there that if you're on a mobile device, that you need to download an app in order to make it work on a mobile device, but it did work from.
I think you're losing out a lot of us white-haired people out there that might have an opinion. Okay, so I have to download something.
Yeah, or use a desktop.
Can I chime in from out here? If you can, I think the Padlet user experience is much better on like a laptop or a Chromebook or something with a larger screen, just because you don't have that. Okay, so then if you don't have that access, then you do have to. It's a free app, but it's a second step. I understand. Yep, that is definitely a roadblock.
Yeah, for sure.
So Suzanne, is there a way that we can get instructions out or available to folks about that?
Step by step.
Yep. So I did put it on the top explanation of the Padlet, because essentially if you're connecting through to it on your mobile, you really can't do anything. It's just kind of static unless you have the app. It sort of just shows you the intro, but you can't scroll or see anything. And then that had a link to more information from Padlet specifically on how to go about, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android or whatever device you're using, or an iPad, how you would access the app. It is on there, but I can put it in more places too.
There were two.
I was just going to suggest that if you want to collect information from folks that are not able to access that, I wonder if there's a way to set up an email address that then could be collected, and then one of these guys could then add that comment to the Padlet. It would take away the interactive nature of it and the ability to like each other's posts, but at least you'd get the substance up there. It'd be the equivalent of being at the meeting, but not being at the meeting. So that's one way to consider doing it, just to get folks that aren't using Padlet apps.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, we'll have to look into how we can do that. In the meantime, while we're here tonight, is there somebody in the room who knows how to download that app, who could provide some assistance?
My phone is on vacation.
Listen, I'm in the same boat as you. That's why we defer to all these experts in the virtual world here.
I can do it.
Yeah, I guess I'm in. I just downloaded the app and, yeah. So you just have to follow the instructions on the link and then just download. I downloaded from Google Play and it shows everything.
If I can chime in, I think Bob's suggestion is really great. If there's, wouldn't it be possible for anyone to send something to the school board and then one person on the school board be responsible for putting that information onto the Padlet?
I just opened the Padlet for the first time, so
You have a hand
it sounds
raised.
like it's possible.
Okay.
Luella has a hand raised.
Luella?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that on the website, the WRED website, it actually says having trouble using Padlet, email us your response. So that looks like it's already set up. I'm not sure where those responses go.
They go to me.
Yeah. So.
Or they go directly to Suzanne?
Yeah.
And
And if they were connecting through social media, I just had them direct message me, but I didn't get any direct messages.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yep.
You will from Maggie.
We'll make sure you get Suzanne's.
Yeah, we'll get you in there.
Yeah, thank you. So,
Next slide.
Bob, yeah, if we could move to the next slide. So the question for the board is how to keep the conversation going here with the community and how to respond. And there are a couple of different ways that this could be done. So we're just going to present a couple of different ideas, and this needs to be your choice how you want to follow with this. So one way would be to have an ongoing forum within the Padlet. And Fiona, do you want to speak to how that might work?
What I was thinking is that as questions come up in the Padlet, so there's each column is about a different topic, and then one is questions for the board. As that happens, if there's one board member that would like to be responsible for then replying, so then you would just add the comment at the bottom, you would just add the reply. It's not a direct reply, but you would add the comment that would be responding to a person's question. And why I think that it would be a powerful way to do it actually in the Padlet is to do a couple of things. One is that it shows that the school board members are engaging with the Padlet and then they're engaging with the community. And it's kind of flipping the switch rather than expecting people to come to the school board to get information. It's the school board pushing out into the community so that you can reach people where they are at. So I think that would be a really powerful tool to show how engaged you are with the community.
So within the thread, for instance, the thread that is questions for the board.
Exactly. So if there are any questions in any of the columns, you would just reply within that column. So it would be within that thread. And so I actually responded to one because there was a question about the short-term versus long-term with the elementary. And I just responded, I just added my comment saying I was a member of the long-range planning committee, and just to clarify, blah, 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 blah. So it's just a quick and simple way to be communicating. And that way also, people would be getting answers as they're reading rather than having to wait for another school board meeting to get the answers to their questions.
So in order for that to work well, then there will have to be someone from the board designated to be monitoring that and to respond for the board to those questions or comments. And that way you would have a live conversational forum if people return back to it to kind of keep up with the conversation threads.
And it can be done in a way that is, like we can say something like every 2 weeks or every week, answers will be given as they're able. So it's not like you have to do it every single day or every 10 minutes. You can do it within a time frame that makes sense, and we can just be clear about that in the introduction. We could add something to the introduction of the Padlet to explain how that happens.
Go ahead, Drew.
So I guess the question would be, what type of questions are you expecting a single board member to answer on behalf of the whole board? So we're talking about the long-term future, and the question may be, are you going to close Jamaica School? Well, there's no one board member that's going to answer that question. So I don't think. So I think we have to be careful as to like what expectation are we setting to the public, and are we setting up a board member to answer questions that really the board should be answering, not a board member. So I think you have to be careful.
And potentially answer incorrectly.
Yeah, I think we just have to be careful as to how we set that up, so that we don't put somebody in a position answering for the board when in fact we haven't made that decision.
Without the authorization of the board.
Yeah. Sounds like the response will be, that's a great question for a board meeting.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just my concern.
Well,
of
you've
kind
got
of
your
setting it up that
politician's
way.
hat on.
Yeah, I would.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the expectation, what I was thinking is the expectation would be any question that's already been answered at a board meeting that people just don't know about would be something that was answered, and not an expectation that every question would be answered. But if there is information that has been shared at a board meeting that is facts, not projections for the future, that those kinds of questions could be answered. That was my thought.
And the other approach would be to use the data from the Padlet as a way to gauge community sentiment and to be thinking about the concerns that are on the minds of the community, and use that information to help inform the decisions that you'll be taking, and to be alert to the areas that are of most concern within the community, so that you can address that in whatever rationale you develop for the decisions that you take. So using it not so much for that just-in-time communication with individual community members, but engaging this overall sentiment from the community and being sure that you're addressing the things that are foremost in the minds of the public.
I would agree, Wes. I mean, I think it makes sense to answer things thoughtfully and correctly, and yes, bring it to the full board and use it as data points, right? So we had 5 people ask the same question, then we really need to address this at our next board meeting. It would kind of help steer us and inform what we do.
I think what we can do, as you'll see as we walk through this tonight, is we can just continue to, we can give you a presentation tonight of what's been said so far, and then we can update that at the August meeting and again at the September meeting, and that will have given 2.5 months for folks to weigh in on this.
We may find more engagement as we get close to the start of school and people start thinking about sending kids back to school versus at the end of the year when we all just wanted to be done in school. So I think you know, the data set, I find it interesting, 25% of the respondents have no intention of sending their kids to our schools, which is kind of interesting to me that we have very, very few respondents, and out of that, a quarter of them are not sending their kids here. Interesting, you know, out of all of the people that we sent information to, which would be student families, I'm assuming we didn't reach out to students that aren't coming here. Like, we didn't directly mail to private school students, but yet they make up a huge chunk of the small data set that we currently have.
Well, let's take a look at the data itself and kind of walk through this, and we can talk through some of the different sets. So the first question that was asked was around preferences for secondary options, and people are asked whether they wanted to keep Leland and Gray open, whether they were unsure about that, or whether they were not concerned about keeping Leland and Gray open. And then similarly, they were asked whether they favored a tuition system for 9 through 12, or were unsure about that, or were opposed to that. And there was a brief explanation of that within the question, but primarily the information about that was the information that was contained in the secondary task force report. And so you can see of the folks who responded, about 23 people as of around 1 o'clock this afternoon had voiced a preference for the tuition model, and about 12 folks had voiced a preference for keeping Leland and Gray in its current structure. And then you see those who are unsure or opposed to either of those.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't either.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah. Can you explain the
So,
data
no.
better? Because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here because my internet connection is not working, and I can't pull up everything I'd like. But you know, the question asked, are you in favor of keeping Leland and Gray open as, you know, our Union High School? And
so that would be the yes.
That would be the yes. That would be the yes for
orange.
the orange, yes. So the orange are the folks who said, yes, we want Leland and Gray to remain open.
All of the orange and
All of the orange. The orange just speaks to Leland and Gray, and the blue speaks to those who are interested in the tuition model. So roughly, you know, almost twice as many folks who responded supported tuition model for grades 9 through 12.
It looks 50-50. If you're truly adding up the orange and the blue,
Yeah.
you've got a 50-50 split.
That's what I thought.
Can I chime in? On the Padlet, there were questions. The question was Leland and Gray. Do you support keeping Leland and Gray? And there was a yes, an unsure, or a no. And what people could do is they could then like it. So if I saw yes, so let's say I'm looking at the Leland and Gray, and it said, do you support keeping it open? I could click yes, but I didn't have to, right? So those are just numbers. Though that isn't that everyone said either yes, unsure, or no. People could read that and not click the like, or people could click the like. So your numbers aren't going to be, they're not hard data numbers. They're just the number of people that clicked, yes, I agree with this. So for Leland and Gray, there were 11 or 12 people that liked the thing that said, yes, I'd like to keep it open. For Leland and Gray being, I'm unsure if I want to keep it open or not, there were probably 2 people looking at that. For no, I don't want to keep Leland and Gray open, there were 15 people that clicked the like button. And then then there's, would you like students to be tuitioned? There were between 20 and 25 people clicked the like button, yes. For I'm not sure if I want kids to be tuitioned or not, there is roughly the same number, probably 3, right, to the Leland and Gray. And then for no, I do not want kids to be tuitioned, there was 5 people.
So does that make more sense? 2 separate questions being asked, being displayed on one chart.
3. Yes. No,
Well, 3, but 2 separate questions are being asked. Each question has 3 possible answers. And
each question has a little heart in the corner. You click the heart.
And that would make sense because we had
So you can only
16 respondents that don't send it.
all 3 hearts, so that's the problem.
you have a hand raised on the Zoom land.
Katie.
Go ahead, Katie.
It also looks like in the Padlet, it will let you heart all of those options.
I was just trying that.
Is that correct?
I did one, let's say.
You can like as much as you want, you just can't double like anything.
What
Right, but I can like, sure, and not sure. Yes. Okay.
Okay, we need a different approach. We need a different approach. That's not going to work.
So what data does this provide us? I'm not sure what we're seeing here that we're supposed to be educating from. If it's not real data, what does this say?
So when can I, because I think you're talking about when I said it's not real hard data. What I'm saying is that it is not like a survey in that you mandatorily have to answer a yes or no question. That's what I'm saying. You're seeing how many people are coming here and taking a look at the information and are voicing their opinions is what you're seeing. That's still data. That's still information, right?
And it's a small sample size, and there may be some duplication in there conceivably, but of those 40 some odd people who have responded, this is sort of where they're leaning. And keep in mind the size of the response.
But this is like 65 answers.
Right, because you can
But how
answer,
many people?
you could like multiple things.
Oh, I know that, but I'm saying, so you're not getting a true sense of what the public's really saying. Because if you have 40-something people and 65 answers, there's a problem here.
It's 2 different questions though, so it would be 40 people answering 2 different questions.
We need a setup that has one answer, one question with 3 answers, yes, no, or unsure. Or like, dislike.
No, I would just, if people are looking for a takeaway from this, to me, if the orange is the specific question about Leland and Gray, and the blue is a specific question about tuition, that there's a bigger lean towards allowing tuition versus closing the school, if you follow what I'm saying. Yeah. So more people who want tuition don't necessarily think it also includes closing the school.
Right.
That the availability for them to have that option to take their tuition money and take it somewhere else, and Leland and Gray stays open. That would be my takeaway from what I'm seeing. As you pointed out, Drew, of a very small group of people who represent a particular town more so than in others. And for people who already have a large number of kids in private school. So I mean, that would be my takeaway from it, that people are more in favor of having tuition available to them, but not necessarily close the school.
Can I ask a question? Were these questions asked in this way during the community meetings? Like in person, face to face?
No,
No.
they didn't ask us outright. I mean.
I'm just trying to figure out. I feel like there's.
Yes.
I feel like there's just maybe a misunderstanding in the community about what things mean. I just feel like we're walking in circles right now. I feel like
I can hit everyone.
like the data is so close, the information is so close, but we just aren't quite getting to it.
So actually, Bob, that isn't exactly what my takeaway would be with looking at this, because if you look at so first off, we did ask that question in the meetings, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. At the Newbrook meeting, more people were in favor of, for the elementary level. I can speak to that when we get there. For the secondary level, most people were in favor of keeping the high school open. If you look at this data, you look at yes for tuition, that's 22 people, right? No is 5 people. The people that said no so the same people who voted yes would also vote for no, correct? And then the same people who would vote for Leland and Gray, yes and no, those are the same. So if you add up the blue for yes and no, you get the same number of people, which is 27. So it is the same. It is the same amount.
Isn't it more likely, though, that folks who voted yes for tuition would vote no for keeping Leland and Gray open?
Yes, right. They're saying yes, we want tuition. No, we do not want to keep Leland and Gray open. And people do have a clear understanding. When at the in-person meetings, people had a clear understanding that having tuition would mean that the school would close. The people in Jamaica some of the people at the Jamaica meeting are interested in pulling out of our union. And that is a separate issue, and most of them want to pull out of the union because they would like to send their kids to a different high school. So it's not a misunderstanding from the in-person meetings. It was not a misunderstanding of what tuitioning meant. It would mean that the school would close.
Did you want to speak here?
Sure, I can only speak for myself and the feeling that I've gotten in Jamaica, but I feel like most people don't want to see Leland and Gray shut down. They don't want to close the school. They want to have an option of a tuition where if their kids aren't, getting what they need from Leland and Gray, they don't have to move to or rent a house in Wynn Hall to be able to go to BBA or, there's so many situations where people are trying to get scholarships, they're trying to get financial aid, they're splitting up families because they don't have an option. And I think that if there was an option and the school was still open, that would be like the best of both worlds for everyone involved. And I'm not saying everyone would send their kids to a private school or another school, but just having the option would be, a little bit of, takes your mind off of stressful things where, these people are literally renting another place and splitting up a family so their children can go to a different school. Like, that's desperation. That's not something that you want to put the kids through just because you're saying, no, we don't want to do tuition because we might not have enough kids going to the school. Well, you can fix some things. Maybe more people want to come to the school. You said that you have people tuitioning to come here already from other towns. Why not open it up a little bit more?
So I think if we keep walking through this a bit and don't, I don't think we want to get stuck here because we have a lot more to walk through. I think you'll get a little fuller picture of what came out of the Padlet and what some of the gaps are that may need to be filled in for the board in this decision. So let's just kind of keep walking through this, Bob. So in addition to choosing a preference for an option, then there was a section for comments about the secondary task force, and then separately for the elementary task force. And here I've pulled out some things that got a larger number of likes, and some of these have, you'll see multiple numbers in parentheses because they're sort of similar themes that showed up in different comments, and that was the number of likes that each one of those comments received. So, for instance, in talking about the secondary task force report, there was a comment that there was not enough engagement with current students. Now, that's what the comment read. It didn't go into detail about that, but whatever that meant, 10 people agreed with it. In addition, there was a comment that there were not enough course options available to students. That while there were sort of a multiplicity of courses because of scheduling and so on, they weren't necessarily available. And 14 folks agreed with that. Probably the most powerful comment around the secondary school was concern about the academic performance ratings of the school. And this came up multiple times by folks who were concerned that the outcomes for kids, as indicated through test scores, as indicated through the U.S. News and World Reports, or however folks are getting this rating information, it is not satisfactory, and they feel there's not enough concern within the board and administration about that. And in a couple of those places, folks spoke very specifically to that and said, this is the reason why we're raising this concern. This is what's primary for us in this concern. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. Related to that, there's an emphasis, perceived emphasis on athletics over academics. And an acknowledgement that the school needs to do a better job of making its own case and, to the community, and I think the report acknowledged this as well. There were a couple of comments about the equity impact on students of the closing of LNG, and they're interestingly opposed to one another. There was one group of folks who said closing LNG is going to really impact the neediest, most vulnerable students the heaviest. And 6 people like that comment. Another person made a comment that said not closing LNG puts those same students at a disadvantage because they have fewer options. And if you close LNG and you have other options and transportation available, that is going to provide greater opportunity to the most vulnerable students. So the question of equity is on folks' mind, but people are looking at it in 2 very different ways. And this next comment, Leland Gray makes equity gaps worse, is sort of feeding into that second narrative there, because they feel that those families with means, those families with who are able and willing to make those sacrifices for their children are already seeking other options for their kids.
That's not LNG's fault. Like the way that's worded makes it sound like LNG makes it worse, and that's just life and society, right? Like if you have means, you have other options. Sorry.
Good point.
So just let me just kind of go through the last couple of things, and then we can sort of open this up for some discussion. You know, there were comments about the importance of the high school to the sense of community, and this is something the board has discussed and noted before. And there was a little bit of pushback about that too, saying that the community is more than the school. The school is not the only thing that binds the community together. So, you know, there are folks who are connected in other ways to the towns. Then there are clearly a group of people who feel like the uncertainty over this decision is hanging over everybody's heads and having a negative impact, including on the hiring process for staff. And then as has been mentioned already, that secondary school choice, as it has been explained and very thoroughly in the secondary task force presentation, doesn't work particularly for Jamaica because there are not other public high schools that are close enough geographically for Jamaica families. So those were some of the key comments that folks made in response to the secondary task force. Let's just kind of pause here and open this up for some discussion and comments.
After we discuss this, is it possible to let Greg go? And his...
You're okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. How many more slides do we have, Les?
Well, we've got five more.
5 more, okay.
But, you know, as we get into some discussion, this is going to take a little bit of time. So we could pause if you prefer.
Greg says he's okay. We'll see how we get along here. I'll take it slide by slide.
So this slide represents a person's comment and then the ability of people to click like on a comment. It's not necessarily based on any sort of data points or research or best practices or what's in the best interest of students. This is simply a
Facebook on that.
yeah. And when I look at this information, and I've sat on this board for a long time, and we've done many studies about things like academics and course offerings and athletics and drama, and we've heard a lot of stuff. And certainly we have spent many hours of our lives looking at how to best serve our students. I'm not sure that this way of gathering public input is overly useful to me. As a board member, it doesn't tell me much because we didn't have an engaged conversation with the person that says secondary school choice doesn't work for Jamaica. Sure, 7 people clicked like. Is that because 7 people that don't think school choice works for Jamaica all want to send their student to BBA? I live as far north in Jamaica as you can get. I could choice my kids to Brattleboro or Green Mountain right now. And it would work for my kids. And I have that ability like every other public high school student. So it doesn't mean it wouldn't work. It may not be what certain families want, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. And I think without the rest of the discussion with these people, we're not getting overly useful data for me as a board member. So I don't know like how much, like if this is what we're gonna base our decision on, I'm not very comfortable with basing a decision, even if we go 2 more months, on something that looks like this.
Just to piggyback on that, I feel like the responses that we're getting are sort of emotional responses. It's not necessarily logic based. It's not something that we've sat down and had a conversation and I understand why you feel the way you feel. I just know you're having an emotion about it. You feel like it doesn't work. That means almost nothing to me. Does it not work because because why? Like, we need to have the conversations in order to make that be meaningful. And I mean, like, all of these things, not, you know, the lack of engagement with current students. I don't really know what that means. I think that this maybe makes the community, gives the community some way to put something out there, but I don't think that it's necessarily useful decision-making information. I think that it's valid information. I don't know how we use it to make sound judgment.
Crystal?
So, I went to the Jamaica meeting, and I struggle with like a lot of these answers, like lack of engagement. Sorry, but most of the people don't even have students here. And when questions were asked, well, that's the rumor I heard. I'm sorry, I want fact-based answers. Low academic performance ratings. You know, they gave us examples as to where they were finding them. They weren't even reputable resources that a Board of Education would use. So, I mean, I think this tablet thing, you know, if we're not gonna get everybody to participate, I feel awful saying this, but it just seems like useless information. And I get the emotional stuff because I've been coming to this board for years begging about Wyndham. So I get the emotional, but you gotta have the fact-based, and I get why my requests were denied because you didn't have the facts. So.
Thanks, Chris.
Just as one more thought on this, having been on the previous long-term planning committee, I think that we had the most meaningful conversations when people showed up to those meetings and said, we don't like this, and we said, cool, why? Let's talk about it. And we actually just like sat down and had a conversation about it. And that was so beneficial to us and to the community members that showed up. And I don't know how we engage that on a big scale because people don't seem to want to engage. They just want to complain about not being engaged. And I would desperately love like everyone to show up and to like actually have a ridiculously long board meeting where we actually have conversations with people and like hammer stuff out. Like, I don't know.
Earlier if we're gonna do that.
I don't know. I don't know how to do it without actually like looking people in the eye and being like, what does it mean to you? And this is what it means to me. And we actually both kind of want the same thing. We're just coming from different angles.
You have two, just like,
I'm sorry.
you have two hands in here. Fiona's might be an old one, I'm not sure, but I know you have first one.
She's been.
So I was at the Jamaica meeting. We did discuss like the facts and the reasons behind a lot of these things. Like secondary school choice doesn't work for Jamaica mainly because some people were saying they work near Manchester. They're going in the opposite direction for them to drive an hour to Brattleboro, drop off their kids, an hour back to Jamaica, another half an hour to their work in Manchester. That's 2.5 hours in the morning to drop off a kid at a school when they can't do that. So if we're closer to two other schools for school choice than Brattleboro, or I don't know what the other one was, then for some people it's, you know, it's not really an option to be driving around all morning before they go to work in the opposite direction. And that was the main reason I heard at the meeting why they said that the secondary school choice didn't work for Jamaica. I don't remember exactly what all of the other reasons were for some of these things, but you know, I think it would have been helpful if maybe we recorded the meetings there and played it for the board, because there were 4 board members, but you guys, the rest of you guys didn't get to see the conversations and the reasons behind these little bullet notes. And there were some answers that you guys would have had answered that you have today about it.
Also, I don't know, at the meeting I went to, I think, well, Thibaut, we watched your presentation about, about Leland and Gray, and I think that if people had some of that information as they were answering some of these questions, it would seem to me that they might have a different, I don't know. Like you were saying, they don't have the information, and so they're just emotion kind of answers.
Well, that was certainly the intent, and even the Padlet itself was set up so that the presentations were there and people could watch them, and I think the expectation was that you would watch and that your comments would be in response to that. Suzanne, you want to weigh in?
I think the goal of this was not to have you guys make a decision based around it. The goal, at least when I put it together, was that it would provide people the opportunity to act as if they were sitting in the chair tonight and raise their hands and said what they wanted to say, and you took it in and did what you did with it. It was their chance to have voice, just not in person. It wasn't to look at this and say, okay, we see these trends, so we have to decide based on them. I think they should be considered, but I don't think that they should be considered the only thing. So it's not hard data, it's trends, it's communication, just not in person. That was the goal.
Okay.
How did we ever get from the previous long-term planning committee to this one? I feel like, in a way, you all, like the way I view the information I give you is to give you information so that you can make a decision. And I feel like you all's decision is, I believe most of you are elected here or, voted here, or maybe you just got signed up, I'm not sure. But like, I think at the end of the day, your job is to pick and make the decision that financially makes the best sense for the board, for West River. And then, I think, and then you share that out, let people comment, and then let them vote on it. And that's the best comment anyone can give you, is whether or not they support it, So, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to clarify that, like, it's you all's decision, Don't feel like it's Facebook, like.
No, definitely appreciate that, right? And yeah, we just wanted to open it up to the community more and, see what they have to say. It's definitely been interesting what we see.
Yeah, and I can say for someone who wasn't at your meeting where you created your Padlet, it's hard not knowing how that was created to gain any insight from these responses. Like they're hard for me. I'm sitting here kind of like, are we talking about an equity gap and then wanting to go to Burton? Because I feel like there's a real equity gap there. But I don't. But so I think it's hard, to like really extrapolate what I think you're hoping to get out of it.
Well,
It,
you have to finish up?
no, I'm good. Go ahead.
Hang on, Fiona and then
Yep.
Ken.
Fiona?
Thanks. To piggyback off what Suzanne was saying, what we were offering was a way to engage with the community, not in person. So you can, like, in that Padlet, you could ask, what do you really mean by this? Like, you can say whatever you want in each of those columns. And so we're offering a way for you to have a dialogue in a virtual space. And that's probably new for lots of folks, but it can happen. We don't have to sit down face to face to really be able to hear people's opinions and to be able to engage with the community, which is why I was advocating for people on the school board to respond and to maybe ask those clarifying questions. Like, this is an opportunity to engage with the community. That's all I just wanted to say.
Thanks, Fiona. Okay.
Were there any financial implications with this? Like, if this happens, it potentially saves you X, Y, Z. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, I think you're getting people who are making maybe maybe, how about that? Maybe making selfish choices, right? Like for me right now, this makes sense, but what about your neighbor down the road who has a 2-year-old or a 6-year-old? You know what I mean? So, you know, what it seemed to me it would be prudent to have financial implications with every option of like, if this were to save you this, would you support it? If
And
this
we're definitely getting to that.
Oh, okay.
Later
Never
on.
mind, then I'll be
Well,
quiet
no,
now.
partially you.
Okay, so
Ken?
what I was gonna say is, as you're saying, how we make decisions and everything else, where we, okay. Every one of us on this board ran for this board for their own agenda, whether they like to admit it or not. It was, I'm for school choice. I'm not for school choice. I'm for the high school staying open. I'm not. These are things that each person brings with them when they're elected, along with whatever the voters want, because that's who we work for. And yes, we do have to make our own decisions on behalf, and hopefully, we know we're not going to make everybody happy. You know, one of the main reasons I'm still on this board after the consolidation is because I want to make sure this board sticks with what the committee promised the people when we combine. Because sometimes we forget that. And I'm that constant reminder of, hey, remember we said we weren't going to do this? We were going to do this? That's one of the main reasons I'm still here. So just, you know, pointing that out.
So as messy as this seems right now, if we can just bear with it a little longer, I think it will also get more focused as we go. And I just want to reiterate what you heard from Suzanne. This is not done with the idea that you should make decisions based on what is in the Padlet. The Padlet is one other way of reaching out to the community and getting a sense of what's on the minds of folks in your community. And I think if we kind of go through this with the idea that everybody is well-intentioned. They may have different goals, different aspirations for their families, but they're, you know, nobody is looking to undermine or do damage here. They're trying to make a case for what they believe and feel is best for their families. And, you know, let's try to keep an open mind about it. But let's see what happened with the elementary questions. So there were 3 different questions that people were asked. One was around a 3-school model, and one was around a 2-school model with 2 K-5 schools, and the other was around a 2-school model with one being a K through 2 and the other being 3 through 5. So in the blue, you have the folks who responding to the idea of having 2 K-5s consolidating, closing one of the schools, having 2 K-5s. Doesn't say which school, where the 2 would be located, but the idea of having 2 K-5s. And that clearly was the one that received the most support from the community. And just staying with that 2 K-5 model, I'd also had the fewest people who said, no, we don't want any part of this. Secondly, maintaining the status quo and having 3 K-5s, a school in every community, was the next most appealing option to folks. And you can see, folks, that's the orange that you see on the screen, and that was fairly evenly split between folks who supported that, were unsure about it, or said no to it. The third option had virtually no support at all, and that was the idea of having a K2 and a 3-5. And that was unappealing primarily because of logistical problems for families with possibly having 2 elementary age kids in 2 different schools and 2 different towns, and the difficulties that that would present. Although as the task force had reported, that has a lot of educational advantages in terms of the kind of organization and collaboration that teachers might be able to offer. But that model is not very appealing right now to the community. So any questions about the data here before we move to the comments?
I'd still like to see data on a single school. I think that, you know, we're talking about long-term planning. We're talking about overall student enrollment projections that are dropping. And I still think we should be looking at and getting information on a single campus model. Not to be a broken record, but we've been through this. We know what the value to student education would be. We also have done the financial research on what it would save the communities, which would allow us to better invest those education dollars into additional programming and fixing some of the other things that have been brought up here. We've looked at this, we have data. I can tell you, days and days of meetings on this, and I'm a little disappointed that we're not even putting that out as a discussion point. If we're willing to put all these things on the table, then why not that?
Lindsay, would you speak to that as a member of the elementary task force
So,
and sort of how that?
We had talked about that in the presentation as a possible long-term solution, but that we can't implement it immediately without some sort of feasibility about, you know, where and how, based on the work that the previous long-term planning committee did. The idea was something bigger, someone who's a professional at figuring out how to make these things work needs to look at this and figure out what a good way to make this work would be. Whether that means a new building or not, and how it works, it's not up to the elementary task force to decide how that could happen. And so it was more of a longer term solution. I do still think that it should be something that we're talking about. If that's the goal and that's what we're working towards, I think that that is a much different conversation than we're gonna have 2 K through 5 schools and never talk about it again. I don't think that that's necessarily the right way to have that conversation. So I would like to see that.
This is long-term planning, right?
Yeah.
Am I at the right meeting?
You are.
Okay,
You are.
so then why are we taking long-term planning topics off the table because it's long-term? We can't implement it right now. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't think the intention was to take it off the table. I think the intention was to, well, it's not here because, and I see Fiona's hand up, and I'll bet she's going to say the same thing I was going to say. So Fiona, you want to jump in here, and then I'll fill in anything else.
Sure. The charge that was given to us is that the board has to make a decision by October on the long range planning. Like, you've made a commitment that you're going to make a decision in October as to the reconfiguration of schools. There is no way that you could reconfigure schools to have a one campus model at this time. That's not something that is reasonable within less than a year. It's reasonable to do that within 5 to 10 years, but there are steps that need to be taken to make that happen. And so at the end of the presentation, we outlined what steps needed to happen. That's why we focused on the other options, because those are options that could be achieved within the time frame of the short part of the long-term planning. That's why we can't go to a one campus model within a year.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, sure.
So we don't really know that we can't. We're saying we haven't figured out a way to do that. But we also said, boy, it seems like a good idea to have some feasibility study of some sort done by somebody who knows how to do this. So maybe the next step is that the board needs to say immediately, let's get that done. And then we can at least have that conversation be included here as to what we may or may not want to do. I am not the person who's going to put that study together, but maybe somebody comes and says, oh, here's a really easy solution. I don't know that that's not the case. I know I didn't have an easy solution, but you know, I'm just me. So I don't know that somebody else doesn't have a solution to at least bring that to the table.
And any of the choices that you're being presented with here can be intermediate steps that would help to solve some of the challenges and problems that you face, and not rule that out, you know, but as you look at more sustainable, longer term solutions.
I thought that was the whole purpose is we needed something long term, and we're talking about 3 to 5 years. What do we define as long term?
3 to 5 years, that probably makes sense.
That's long term, right?
Right.
So that's what we should be looking at. The fact we can't do it immediately today, okay, well, it's good. Well, this is the long term planning, you know, and I would argue that it is feasible to do in the shorter term, as long as this board commits to getting something done. As long as you keep kicking the can, we're not getting anything done. But if we're not willing to engage the conversation about long term and saying like, hey, it's right 5 years from now. If that's what's right 5 years from now, and we've all looked at the student projections, then this is the place to have that conversation. What's the student count going to be in 5 years? In 5 years, we can't support 2 K-5s. We can't do it now. Like, what are we looking at?
You have another hand as well.
Okay, Crystal, and you, and then Luella. Go ahead.
So, I'm kind of new with all of this. When you guys say one campus, are you saying like one campus for K through 5? And then one campus for 6 through 12? Or are we talking like one campus for everybody?
So what we did research on and what was presented to us by our educational experts as the best possible model would be to have all of the second graders in the same place, all the third graders in the same place. So we could have 2 classes of second graders and 2 classes of third graders, and those teachers could collaborate. That doesn't show up here at all.
It does in the K2, 3, 5,
But
way that nobody wants because
exactly.
it's spaced out.
But we heard loud and clear and saw plenty of evidence that we could provide better educational opportunities for our kids if we put all of our elementary school students in the same building. We don't have that many kids anymore. And if you look at the trends, which the administration's been kind enough to give us that go out for the next decade, unless something happens in the West River Valley, we don't have that many students coming in. Maybe we need a really cold winter or 2, I don't know. But there's not a lot of students coming into our schools. So we're talking long term. Why are we ignoring the data sets we've been given, which are that our student enrollment are still dropping for a while?
So, I don't know if this helps, but long-term planning, you don't solve something that's a long-term problem overnight. I think this is an intermediate step.
So is this an intermediate planning group or a long-term planning group?
With long-term planning, there's short-term, intermediate, and long-term, right? So if your goal is, at the end of the day, to have one campus, then there are steps to get there. This was a step to get there.
So I just feel like I don't know, I personally think that one campus, having done a ridiculous amount of conversation and research about this, seems like a good answer to me. I don't know that it's necessarily the right answer for the district at this point. Like, we need to have that conversation, right? But like, we need to have that conversation. And I feel like while we're saying, here is the most immediate step, I don't want to make it only about that. It needs to also include other, like, bigger picture. If we're talking about that as a possible solution, which not just something that I feel strongly about, there's comments on the board about, on the, whatever the online thing is. That's the one. But so, it is a thing that needs to be discussed, and by not including it as a is this also something that, you know, we're gonna allow people to comment on? I feel like it's pushing it off the table, as instead of making it a goalpost, potential goalpost. It is something that's over there off the table. We're not gonna talk about it or think about it right now.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the reason that the one campus elementary school wasn't put on the charts right now was maybe because you couldn't get people to vote to close a school. Because I remember you guys talking a lot about how you would have 2 schools that you would use for the elementary school, and then the third one would still be a school used building. So we wouldn't have to close one down, and we wouldn't have to have the town vote to have that school closed down. So if you had a one campus model, maybe you have use for like one elementary school to keep open as a possibility for later on, or for use for like the pre-K programs or whatever was going on. But then you'd have to probably close one down, definitely, and that town would have to vote to have that elementary school shut down. Was that the problem?
Well, that's
like the biggest problem. Yeah, right? Like that's the biggest issue.
It's not necessarily what's driving everything, but it is certainly.
Yeah, and you guys didn't mention it. And I don't have any elementary school kids, but you know, it'd be.
And this is one of the things that I was talking about is, you know, we said that a school would not get closed down before the whole board got together, and you know, without a vote from the town. So now if you're going to turn around and say, well, we're not really closing the school because we're going to keep kindergartners there. That's not what was meant by closing a school without a vote from the town.
All right, so, thanks, Ken. I think we have Luella out there, and then can we move on?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, just 2 things quickly. The first thing to reiterate is that the goal for the task force, like Fiona said, was for what could be done for this next budget cycle. So that is why these are the exact options. This is what the task force presented. The second reason why we're in this long-term planning thing, as Al said, has to do with the phases, and it also has to do with the community support and the way you're engaging the community. And that is why we're still doing this, because the previous attempts at doing this, you know, the community members were not brought along with the planning process and kept informed and had the buy-in in order to make it a successful plan. Because you can spend 2 years meeting for 5 hours every week and create a plan, and then the town votes it down because no one knew it was happening and no one supported it. So that's why we're going through this process, and it is a process. We have, you know, professionals involved to help guide the school board through this process, and it takes time. And I think that not losing sight of the central campus model is important. There's a lot of questions about that and how we turn that into, you know, the best school, so we're attracting more families to our area. But those were the 2 things I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it could be added to the Padlet, right? Somebody could go put it in.
All right, next slide.
So in some of the things that came out in the elementary task force discussion was first that this decision needs to be made. A decision needs to be made soon, because the uncertainty is just not working for families and for kids. A lot of folks feel that choice within the WRED is helpful and attractive, and they appreciate it. But there's also recognition that there are a lot of families who are not sending children to the schools, who live in the district but are not sending their kids here. And do we know why? And shouldn't we know why? There was a great deal of support for cultivating the outdoor education, maintaining farm-to-school programs. You know, and this showed up in multiple places, but it's clearly one of the things that folks value about living in these communities, and particularly at the elementary level, wanting kids to have opportunities to be outdoors, to learn about the outdoors. And not necessarily in the purview of this board, but in that vein, there were a fair number of people who said, we need to be developing a recreation center here for families, and whether, you know, folks were thinking about something in connection to one of the schools or one of the school facilities is unclear, but there does seem to be interest in a way to maximize the outdoors recreationally here for the benefit of families. For one, there were questions also about pre-K and what folks were looking for in pre-K, and the majority of respondents there seemed to prefer more local preschool options. If they were in 3 schools, or if we consolidated the 2, having them in 2 local schools.
Quick point on that. On the survey thing, it says a pre-K in every town. Now, if you say a pre-K in every town, you're gonna have a problem because you're gonna have to rent space in Brookline. So it should say in each school.
In each school.
Elementary school, or, you know.
Yeah.
And be more definitive, because
we've mentioned the issues around separating elementary age kids in 2 buildings. The perception of the folks who responded to this seem to feel that a centralized model is too expensive and not practical. And, you know, the comment was something, well, $50 million for a new school, we can't support that. And there were a lot of likes there.
So where would that come from?
Well, it came from some...
50 million, and that's the problem with something like this. It's like a piece of bogus information like that got 10 likes. Nobody ever said we were spending $50 million.
that came from our superintendent.
That
If we were to build a school, it would cost X amount of dollars.
But the
We have a
centralized plan didn't include those.
We have a $50 million proposal.
It has nothing to do with that plan. It's a centralized school.
I don't know.
It has been discussed.
So I think the way to interpret that is that there are...
It was an option.
There are folks who are concerned about the costs. And understanding what costs might be involved with that is going to be an important part of making that decision. And, you know, that's part of the reason why Greg is here and is going to be giving us some more updated information about current facilities, but you may need to be looking beyond current facilities at that. In a couple of places, it was mentioned that if there was going to be consolidation, that Jamaica is a good location for one of those locations. There were a couple of comments about 2 schools being at either end of the district works better transportation-wise, and that both Newbrook and Jamaica are sited in places that offer more outdoor opportunity and more amenable for elementary kids. And then a good chunk of folks weighed in and said, if it costs more to have better schools, we're willing to pay for that. So there's sentiment there in support of increased spending for increased quality. And, you know, those were among the things. There were more secondary comments than elementary comments, but those were sort of some of the highlights there. So let's just move one slide and just take a quick look at preschool options. And so there are 3 questions here. Should there be one central pre-K, and that's what you see in blue? Should there be a preschool in every town? That should read maybe a preschool in every school. That's the orange. And then, oh no, I'm sorry. The third one, the one in gray, it says preschool in every school. That was really more referring to if there was a consolidation into 2 elementary schools, should there be a preschool in each of those 3. And, you know, the preference here is for more localized pre-K. And secondarily, pre-Ks in schools that were housing elementary programs. And the consolidated pre-K, which is what you have now, is was the least attractive of those to the folks who were applied. So if we could move one more. So there was one section that included questions for the board. There weren't a ton of questions, but they kind of fit, many of them fit into one of three categories. Either there were questions around finance, around governance and organization, and around school quality. And the ones around finance asked about the viability of maintaining 3 elementary schools, asked about the savings that would be realized by closing one of those schools, about the savings that would be realized from closing Leland and Gray, what the costs of the union offices are, how is school choice factoring into this, how many secondary students are being homeschooled, and earlier the question was raised about how many students are not attending the district schools. So, you know, those were some of the things that were on folks' mind that were raised to the board. The questions around governance, a lot of this is driven by the options for Jamaica. And what there seems to clearly be more concern about the existing options within that town. And so are there other options, and what would happen if Jamaica were to leave the district? What would the impact of that be on Jamaica, and what would the impact of that be on the district? And what would be involved in that decision? How would that actually happen? And then thirdly, the questions around school quality. The first is a direct quote from one of the comments. It says, "Is it okay for L&G to just be okay?" And that is, if the school's rating was sort of in a lower tier statewide, is that acceptable? And what are the outcomes for L&G students? Are there good options for kids as they graduate? What's the graduation rate? What student perceptions? How do kids in the school feel about the opportunities that they have, the course offerings that they have? You know, these are questions.
It's been repeated a lot that Leland Gray is a low-performing school, and we're quoting data from the state. I don't know exactly what that data is. You referenced US News and World Report website where people are finding things. We shared in the secondary task force the snapshot that the AOE releases comparing us to the other schools in Windham County, the public schools in Windham County. And we were on par with everybody else. I'm the first person to say that we could always be better. But I think we need to be very careful how we keep characterizing and restating that we are a low-performing school, because I don't think that's accurate. So I just want to put that out there. I think we need to be careful as a board and how that gets communicated. But I think we're creating our own PR problem that isn't based on any facts whatsoever. So I just think that's something we need to be careful. We can't, repeating the same thing over and over again just creates an echo chamber. And if it's not true, all you're doing is feeding into a
you have to repeat
bad
it.
narrative.
You just gotta click like. He's gotta heard it once.
I think you should make a sign with the
Stickers, I heard
with the
LG.
AOE thing,
Ken.
and we'll hang it up
Ken.
there, and this way it'll be.
I mean, there's an AOE website which has a snapshot that has data for every school, and that's the data we included in the presentation. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's the third party, right? Somehow we need to get that third party information because they don't believe us.
Right.
The people obviously are not believing us. Is it okay for LNG to be okay? No, never is. There's always room for improvement. But somehow the people aren't getting the message and they don't believe us. They think we're just going the party line. So if we present a bigger third party perspective.
And I don't think it's about like one side or another. I think it's just trying to be factual. Just trying to be like report fairly what the data actually says. And if people are, I mean, I go back, I've said this numerous times to this board, like people at the original long-term planning session at one point the previous summer, someone made a comment, well, Leland Gray doesn't do X, Y, and Z. It's like, one of the things they specifically mentioned we've been doing since the 70s. Yeah. So, like, but we keep repeating it. Well, we don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this. It's like, so I mean, I just think these are things that are dangerous. They're very dangerous. I just want people to, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't cautioning you about that particular thing. So
I just want to add that through the process, what we did is we asked a whole lot of questions, and we received a lot of answers. And I will tell you, after spending a year doing long-term planning and having very open dialogue, I learned a lot about the programs and the student offerings and what was better for our students. And we had those conversations because we did challenge the administration, like, this is what I'm hearing. And they would come in with, here is the information, here's the reality. When we said students won't fit in that building, Greg would come back and go, actually, the capacity of that building is. Well, we've been told the septic is not good enough to house students. Well, is it? And they came back with actual information. We went through a process where, yeah, we had some challenging conversations, and we were provided actual information. At this point, we need to put that information that we have. We already have that information. And that information doesn't support or answers many of these questions. But we're not putting that information back out. We're letting people continue to cycle bad information. Like, how do we change that? Because we know a lot more than we did 5 years ago. We've been doing this study now for 5 straight years. We have tons of information. Bob has shared about the programs that we have here. You know, like the conversation, you know, do we have a co-op program? I think everybody on the board knows that, right? Like, I think that we should be able to speak to that program. But 3 years ago, if you had asked that question, what is a co-op program at Leland and Gray like? How many board members could have answered that with the detail we have now? Well, the question now is, the public doesn't know that. They weren't at the meeting where we learned all about all kinds of interesting programs that are offered here. Yeah. So we're letting people make comments and kind of help craft our decision when they don't have the information and we're not giving it to them. Yeah, so maybe we don't have as many courses. I know we don't have as many courses. But we have some other things that are pretty cool. And we should be talking about that. Not just letting this, I'm agreeing with Bob, we can't just kind of let this thing spiral with bad information.
Can I write that down?
You can write that down. and I'll tell you, like, and we had some very uncomfortable conversations. We pushed back and forth about actual information in order to come up with, and we all learned a lot about how our system works, what's actually available for our kids, what is our graduation rate, what do we do to keep kids in school. We had those conversations. And I just think that we're kind of moving backwards because we're letting this narrative just exist when we know it's not actually.
It's not just existing, it's getting likes.
It's existing and picking up steam when we know that's not the reality.
But I will say, I mean, the challenge, I think it was Luella that said it earlier, I think she said it pretty well, is that the challenge is, the double-edged sword of this is that at some point, if you're gonna move something past voters, they have to understand it well enough to be supportive. And if that means that you have to continue to re-engage them, that's what you have to do. But it's just a matter of like, maybe it's the how. You know, maybe it's more of a controlled narrative than an open-ended, what do you think? That things have to be more focused, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the expert on this. I worry too about what the nature of the collection is, and then what that does to us as it continues to spiral us. Because this is my beginning of my 7th year as principal, and we've been talking about this since I've been here. So, I mean,
we need a book, and I'm not an IT guy.
We're in a library, so what do you need?
That's good. And we need to have in that book all of the questions and the answers, so that we can actually engage the public when they have something. For example, what is the options for Jamaica? We already know the answers to those questions. We've researched it, we've been through that, we know what it takes. We know how many students Leland and Gray can hold, we know how many students Townsend can hold. We know we have all of the information. I don't think there's anything you guys haven't provided us at least 10 times. Probably more than that. So we should be putting all of the questions and answers together and giving that out. How about that? Like a very clear, these are the questions we've been asking, this is the answers we've been getting.
Well, and a lot of that came out in the presentations that are posted on West River Red.
But clearly that's not getting anywhere based on what we're seeing.
Right,
so. No, I don't think it's fair to say that, Drew. I think that, you know, there's a fairly small group of respondents, and this is what's on their minds, and that's important information to understand and to know too. But, you know, it doesn't mean that the rest is not getting through, but it does mean that that's work that has to continue. And that's where it's got to go at this point.
Just also that we are putting a ton of information out. Suzanne's done a wonderful job of organizing stuff and putting things out there. But it does still require somebody to be like, gee, I wonder what does happen for graduation at Leland Gray? What does that even look like, and how many people are doing it? They have to go dig and find it. I mean, it's there. The information is there, but it requires how we are currently doing it. It requires more digging than most people are going to be willing to do to find that answer. They want to throw it out there and somebody tell me this, and somebody give them a reply. And I don't necessarily think that somebody from the board should be like on that forum where, you know, I see this has been hearted 7 times and I'm going to reply to this. I'm nervous about the implications of one board member speaking for the whole board in any context. Like, even if it's like, go to this thing and you'll find the answer you need. Like, that's about all I could stomach for it. And I don't know what the best answer is unless it's you know, an actual like, here's the question and here's the answer, and here's the question and here's the answer, I'm gonna type in my question and somehow it's magically gonna say, okay, that's the closest one that we have an answer to is this. And I can't build that thing, but we need like a search engine where people can be like,
WRED search engine.
yes, like, where does it say this?
Frequently asked questions.
At least that. It is deceiving when the narrative of whatever thing, whether it's poor outcome, graduation outcomes at Leland and Gray or whatever, that's deceiving, and it gets bounced around in the same echo chamber and liked a million times, and I come in there not knowing much about it, and I see it has 17 hearts. It must be true. But we're not doing ourselves any service, or anybody else for that matter, because how are people supposed to actually get answers when they're just going in? And all right, you get it.
Yeah, I think we understand.
I'm lost.
The hearts system.
Val, you do have a hand up.
Fiona. You're on mute.
I'm really concerned at where this discussion is going. I feel like you're not giving people enough credit. I believe that people can look and see that people have other opinions about the state of our schools and have them as valid, whether they're based in facts or based in emotions. But I think we have to be really careful. If you're wondering, if you're looking at the Padlet and being like, wow, there's all these perceptions that you feel are untrue, then participate. You have every right to participate in the Padlet. You can say, here's some information. And as a board member, you can say, as a board member, I am speaking for myself. Or you could just put it in anonymously like everybody else is doing. But saying that you don't know how to engage, and Drew, you spoke about like, you just don't know how to get information to people. This is a perfect opportunity where people are wanting to engage, and they're wanting to be involved in their community and in their schools. And I think we need to applaud them for telling you how they feel and what they think. And I think responding to them and engaging with them is the perfect way to help it be balanced and help it be informative and help it be a way that we are communicating with our community and working and having the idea that people are doing this with the best intentions. And I think we need to hold that in our hearts while we engage with each other. And I think it's the responsibility of the board to engage.
Thanks, Brianna.
So if we're engaging with each other, why are we doing it anonymously?
All right.
So we have one more slide, and here's some thoughts about possible next steps. And I know Bill is going to weigh in on this a little bit too. But to respond to these questions around school quality, there's a lot of data in the secondary task force report. But it would be helpful to supplement that with some data around specific to the graduation rate, to post-secondary outcomes for high school students, and school performance data for L&G. I would just mention that somebody in commenting about this, one of the folks who raised concerns around academic quality said, yes, we saw the chart was very helpful, but it's not okay for us to be on par with the nearby public schools if the nearby public schools are also not performing all that well. So, you know, any data that would shed some light more clearly on the academic performance and the college and career readiness data for graduating students would be helpful to have. And the board could ask the administration to prepare that data for the next meeting. A second way to look at not only Leland and Gray, but perhaps each of the schools, is to have an independent review of the school. There are organizations that do that, who can come in and do a host of data collection that not only looks at performance data, but interviews people, does observations, something that takes place over a period of time, and can give you a report with some recommendations around school quality review. And that's an option if the board wanted to ask administration to investigate that. I imagine administration could come back to you next month with some possible approaches to that. But having a third-party sort of independent review of the schools could also help to address in a more objective way some of the concerns that have been raised.
Well, was that like the ask coming in with
It's funny you should mention that. Yeah, NEASC is a accreditation group that previous administration, I think with board's approval, took Leland and Gray out of. It's a decennial, every 10-year process of reviewing school, variety of different outcomes in schools for accreditation. Something we talked about doing. Bill and Jen and I met with the NEASC people just before COVID to kind of explore, and we were prepared to come to you guys with at some point some kind of a, because it does have financial implication to it, which is why the predecessor just suggested the board we leave it. So that is something we talked about pre-COVID. It's absolutely something that could be talked about again. I don't think that you could start that now and be done within the year. It's a couple year process to kind of start, but there would be an initial visit that they would do that would give us a lot of feedback. So
there are multiple options.
Right, there's other things as well.
It's a longer term investigation, but it would give you that kind of more objective assessment of the school against a set of criteria that are kind of standard criteria for effective schools.
And it really looked bad when the administration came down and said, you know, we want to drop this. And it's only because of the financial implications, because if you read into that, it makes it look like we don't want to be, where in fact we do want to be, because, you know,
in
we're
fairness,
actually good.
In fairness, Ken, they did go down an alternate path instead.
Right.
With 2 other high schools in the state that did some kind of like I don't know, it was something they created with these other 2 high schools to do an analysis. I can't speak to how it played out, but it only happened that one time. But yeah, that part was free. So there was an implication, but yeah.
Bill, do you want to speak to the other items on this slide?
Excited to speak to other items on this slide. So under the finance, this was just in preparation in case the board wanted to take any kind of peripheral action to look at any of the models that the elementary task force had produced. Do you want our office to just work that out into what would those cost savings look like? It would be general, would not be specific, like to the penny, but it might give you some context. So that's under the finance. And then Drew has already answered the procedural. Thank you, Drew. That we've talked about all the different procedural things, but if it would be helpful for the board for me to work with our attorney just to create that path, which would be Ken's question about using buildings for educational purpose, and the conversation that happened with the young lady in the audience about Jamaica and considering leaving the district itself, to what are the implications statute-wise on tuition in the high school. So if it would be helpful to the board, I'm more than happy to lead kind of a finance thing based on the elementary task force suggestions, and then the procedural, just kind of laying out those 3 procedural pathways that we have discussed for 4 or 5 years, but just kind of put it in one document. If that's helpful to the board, I'm happy to provide that by August.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Sure.
More consolidated questions and answers.
Consolidated, frequently asked questions.
I'm sure the procedural thing will keep coming up and up and up. So, some more time.
Yeah, pen and paper.
We should remind everybody this has been voted on. Like the public has voted on this. Jamaica has voted on this already. So this is not something that is new. We've already been through this. And the public opted to not leave Luna Gray the last time this came up. So yes, maybe another document for people that weren't involved the last time around. But as a Jamaica resident, I can tell you that we've been through this before.
But it's another way of reaching out to the public.
At some point, should we just put a plan together and let the public vote on it?
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd like that.
I mean, we have 17 people that showed up at actual meetings, another 30 people that showed up online. We're getting no more public input now than we had a year ago when we said we didn't have enough public input to put a plan together. In fact, we have less public input now than we did a year ago when we said we didn't have enough public input. Those meetings were full, if you remember.
Yeah.
We had lots of public input. They all showed up. And we had hundreds and hundreds of written comments. So I'm just saying, like, at some point, we're just going to have to make a decision and then go out and explain that decision ahead of a vote and let the public weigh in on it, because we're not getting more public information or more public engagement now than we did before. In fact, it's less. So, like, where in this process do we just make a decision? I don't know, just curious.
As to piggyback off that, I feel like the board has not even had these discussions. We've heard, we've listened. So far, that's what we've done. We as a board have not even actually started to really get into the weeds and discuss this stuff. So, at some point, real soon, we're gonna have to do that. Like, real soon. Nothing can happen until we like it or hate it. We're the ones that have to make the decision. We're the ones that have to make the final call, right? That's the job. And we can't do that until we can, like, have that same heart-to-heart that we're talking about having with the public. We need to have that amongst the board as well. And those are long, hard conversations.
We have 2 meetings left to do it in before we have to put a budget together. Right?
Yeah.
Right, we get August and September.
That's right.
So we've got to get there in 2 meetings.
It's gonna be awesome.
But you may be closer than you think. And one of the pieces is certainly has to do with the existing facilities and sort of understanding what their needs are and their suitability for various options. And that's why Greg is here tonight. And Greg, sorry we made you sit through such a riveting conversation.
So, yeah, the hand just popped up. I don't know if you want to do it before you go to Greg.
Don't do it. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I wasn't part of the creation of this Padlet. I'm actually just looking at it for the first time tonight, but I can tell that the intent was to reach parts of the community who maybe access information differently than some of us do, who are maybe not able to be at meetings in any way or able to access a website through a laptop. And listening to members of the board discredit the information that was gathered there and kind of snicker at the format is really disappointing. And it makes me as a community member feel less inspired to be a part of this process and to just want to continue to tuition my own children into a private school.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. Greg, how long were you thinking of presenting?
How long do you want me to?
Minute and a half.
You have 3 minutes, ready, go.
I don't know, did you get it, Bob?
This right here.
Yeah, I don't know if where you want me here, I'll just sit down.
So you want me to share this again?
I don't know.
You do have another hand up as well. Sorry.
Start there. Better.
Give me a second to get this.
Hi, Julia. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Just really briefly, the prospective agenda for next month and things that you're thinking about going into the August meeting on the topic of school quality. If you're going to prepare something to debunk that, personally, as a community member, I am specifically really interested in hearing how the Vermont Agency of Education's data dashboard for academic outcomes, like the academic assessment that Leland Gray goes through, I'm interested in hearing how that is inaccurate and how that does not actually represent the academic outcomes of our school. Because when I look at that as a parent in this community, I am very, very concerned, more so about how Leland and Gray compares on a statewide level using the state's own data, which is not some like, weird dark hole on the internet, but the actual data point that we're talking about. So if that is false, I would be really interested in hearing more about that.
Thanks, Juliet.
Well, sounds good. Well, so I wanted to give you, I just gave you the elementary schools. I thought that's what we were doing today.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. All right, sweet. So I just wanted you all to know, I tried to put, I shared out a bunch of different information to you all since last week's planning meeting. So there's obviously we have the CNA and we have some things that are maybe not on the CNA. I want to be very clear, these are very rough estimates. They were just kind of some numbers I put together to try to think about, like, these are things that I think need to be addressed at these buildings, on top of, additional to the CNA. So this was just like, if you're thinking, right, long term we want to stick a bunch of kids back in Jamaica, right? The kitchen needs to be addressed, the heating system, when we did the lighting upgrade over April break, again, there was like 95-degree air in there when the boiler was supposed to be off. I don't know where it was coming from. It was definitely air being put into above the ceiling, which would explain why all the ceiling tiles have about a 2-inch bow in them. So if you have uncontrolled heat being put in there, and then in the winter you're going to create moisture, you're going to bow ceiling tiles. So far I have neglected to replace the ceiling tiles until we figure out what's going on with the heating system. When we get in for the fall boiler cleanings and unit ventilator cleanings with Alliance, I'll have them inspect that and figure out, that needs to happen either way. The kitchen is in dire need of a renovation. The cabinets that are in there are in pretty rough shape. There's not a 3-bay sink. There wouldn't need, there'd be a need for a dishwasher if you're going to have that many kids there to really open that kitchen back up. The window coverings, I know on like the front of the building where the metal roofing is, those window quilts that are all there are really gross.
Well, I was wondering, why are we doing quilts if we shouldn't be doing window replacements?
Well, that's on the capital plan. So it's both. This was additional. This was just things that weren't on the capital needs. You'll see on the next one down that's there. And the septic issues, Greg Socha and I were just talking, the maintenance guy up there, and he had reminded me that when we replaced the baffle, there's some real concern about the leach field. There's about a 2-foot bow over about 38 feet of pipe coming out of the building there. We had to have it water jetted 3 times last year by Vermont Sewer and Drain. He estimated that to be between $20,000 and $25,000. You're going to have to cut up the floor, dig up the concrete, find the pipe, put in a new, couple new sections of pipe, compact dirt underneath there, re-pour concrete, relay down floor. I mean, it's a pretty major project.
Greg, is that an issue we have to deal with for this year's?
No, we're just going to continue to water jet it. We did it 3 times this year. So at this point, Brian Tyler from Vermont Sewer and Drain knows exactly what he's got to do, how he's got to do it, what's the easiest way. What happens is, so you have this bow. The issue is you have low flow sinks, low flow toilets, and it ties into an area that they don't use because they're only using a couple of classrooms. So what happens is there's not enough water to push things through, so they back up. At this point, he knows, the first couple times he was kind of finding his way through what works where. Now he knows he just needs to go out to the septic and go in that way. It's just, it works, it functions. Again, if we're thinking, hey, we want to pump a bunch of kids in there, yeah, I mean, with 13 to 16 kids, you know what I mean?
You can get away with it.
Yeah, I think you can get away with it for another year versus
You'll get
spending.
more water flow.
We could get more water flow. I actually had talked to Greg about like every Friday going in and just turning on water. But the issue is it's a sensor flusher and a sensor sink. He said, what do you want me to do? Stand there with my hand in the way for 20 minutes? And I was like,
Yeah, the kitchen sink's probably not a sensor.
but it's
Turn that
not,
one
that's
off.
not part of the loop.
Oh.
Put duct tape over it.
I wish it was that easy. Nothing ever is. So here's the capital needs assessment real quick. You have some of the exterior things. Again, this came off your 2017 capital needs assessment. I don't know that anything has been done. And I just don't know. I'm not saying it hasn't. I know that nothing's been done with fuel storage. I don't believe UV filters have been done. And you can see, so if you see any numbers on the left one that says year to be completed, those were the years that were on the initial assessment. And so, and again, I only gave you out for like 4 or 5 years, and this is just the capital stuff, not your operational. But so you can see that there's a lot here. Windows is on there, right? Ceiling, roofs is on there. The ceiling tile, suspended ceilings is in there, right? You know, so I didn't need to add those things because a lot of it was there. But as you can see, there's some money that is due to go into Jamaica, like big chunks of money. 74, 31, 26, 30, you know, on top of those numbers up above. There's some, I can tell you that there's siding that needs to be replaced around that whole multi-purpose room back where the boiler is. That stuff, that growth in there had kind of overgrown. You probably got to go through and cut out 4 feet of the siding and put new T111 up at this point. It's rotten. So if you want to just keep going, we'll bust through. So really quick too, before we go too far, each elementary kind of has their like one or two big ticket items that like we probably need to address, right? So next was New Brooks. New Brooks is some of their heating stuff. I was really hoping that this would have that both of these would have been picked up by the IAQ grant. They were not. Only Townsend was chosen for IAQ. For some reason, we got a denied letter from Efficiency Vermont on all of the 7 other schools, which was a real bummer. Because as you can see, we've got, you know, $90,000 worth of stuff. So you have an issue with heating and cooling stuff there. So the bottom one is just the 2 big unit vents in the multi-purpose room, gymnasium, kitchen, right? Everything there. They don't run. They're not running. They're not really giving you a whole lot. The other issue you have is your ERVs in the back of the building. So when you put in the heat pumps, what happened is they sized it based on the airflow that you had. It was pre-COVID. ASHRAE then steps in and says, you've got to change the air in here X number of times. So we bring in an Alliance. Alliance comes in and they're moving a bunch more air. The issue is 2 of the ERVs that are providing the makeup air, they don't have heating coils in them. So all they are able to do is mix the air with the incoming air. So what you have is 70-degree air coming out, 0-degree air coming in. So you're actually pushing, you know, 30, 40-degree air into the classrooms. And then those heat pumps that aren't sized, you know, that are sized to the room size, but not when you're then changing out the air that much. And so now they're really struggling to keep up. So that would that's kind of a tough one there. That's New Brook's challenge. And again, as you'll see, there's I don't know how I left FY22 in there. I probably shouldn't have. But so you can see kind of the things moving forward. Oh, sorry. What happened, Peter?
Frozen.
Oh, I'm frozen or he's frozen?
He thinks you're frozen.
Uh-oh, buddy.
This is Joe's clock.
I think
It's
we're
you,
frozen.
not me.
We're frozen. No, we're frozen.
Ah, there we go. It's you,
Oh,
not
they're
me.
all frozen?
The Wi-Fi works out. It's fine.
So again, here you go. You can see some of the things that are on there, right? I mean, there's some windows that need to be replaced at New Brook. The parking lot, again, if we're gonna keep that, it would be great to try to pave that parking lot. when I first got into working in schools, one of the first trainings I went to, they said, on average, every pound of dirt that goes into your building costs you about $800 to remove. So when you calculate in, you know, your custodial costs, your flooring replacement costs, and things like that, it comes out to be about $800 a pound. So when you have a dirt driveway like that, you think about just how much is being brought in, and so that really would make a big difference there, you know, for staff and student safety, among other things. We haven't put it out this year because we just didn't have.
All right, so we are carrying on.
Sorry, Mr. Clausen, I'm late.
And Greg is continuing.
All right, great. Yeah, so here's the Newbrook stuff. You can see, you know, out of, you know, 4 or 5 years, just kind of what some of the things are. As you can see, like windows, the newer windows, the NPR asphalt roof, they're out further. That's why you don't see a number on there. So that's kind of where that is. If you want to drop down to the next one, Bob, we'll go check out Townsend real quick. So here's Townsend. Townsend's is their tough one is their playground. That playground is in rough shape out back. The wooden structure is really due to be replaced, and to put one in to handle enough kids there, you're looking at a healthy chunk of money. You know, Wyndham put one in last year. It was $45,000 for the structure. We spent another $8,000 on edging and mulch, so it was $53,000. They had 16 kids. There's 80 in there. In the spring, I did reach out to someone, and they gave me a quote for a playground that would support. I think it was up to, like, I don't know how they come up with this number either, but I think it was like 82 kids, and it was $75,000. So I was definitely on the light end there, trying to be frugal. But like the swings in Townsend are, if you look at where they are currently, they're a little close to the trees, which do not meet your safety code for use zones. So it would be good to get in there, kind of, you know, and reshape that area, cut some brush back, and give the kids something fresh there. The other really tough thing there in regards to Townsend and their long term is, in general, when kids want to play kickball or whatever, they're doing it out on the common, which could give you the only playground in America where kids can run out onto Two-State Highway. It makes you unique, but maybe not in the way you want to be.
Common sense the hard way.
Yeah. I mean, I just told my dog that. You only run out there once. So here you go. Again, there's some good projects there to be done. The fire alarm panel, that turned out to not be an accurate number. So in the state of Vermont, if you have not done an addition of 20% of your building or replaced your fire alarm panel, then you're grandfathered in. That building is currently grandfathered in. There are no classroom door magnets. There are no smoke detectors in classrooms. I'm actually still trying to figure out how you got permitted for pre-Ks in there, because you're supposed to have CO2 sensors, carbon monoxide sensors, and smokes. And there are neither in there. I'm not sure how that happened, but we're going to ride with it. So that number turned from 20,000 to 85,000 when we put that job out for bid. We got the bid in from King's Electric. What happened?
You're being recorded.
Yeah, I know. Is that okay? You don't want to? I mean, that was the number.
Yeah, I know. It just.
I know. I like it as much as you do.
Just waiting for the fire marshal to show up tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as you don't replace the panel, you're completely within code. But once we went in and said we want to replace the panel, the gentleman from Mammoth Fire Alarm said, well, it's not that simple. You've got to do X, Y, and Z now. So we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We initially kind of balked at it and thought maybe we don't do that right now. That's a lot of money. And then we started thinking about school safety and said we can't lock this building down. So another thing that we're going to put in with this is going to be a button in the office so she can hit, and it will close every single classroom door. You know, and then your teachers all know if all those doors close, I don't go out it. I make a phone call to the office and say, why did my office just close, right? You know, or why did my door just close? Because something's could potentially be going on. Yeah. So, you know, we need to do that for safety purposes. That needs to happen. And having you know, there are not no smoke detectors in the building. They're just not in every classroom. They're in the hallways, they're in the bathrooms, they're in the, you know, they're in there, you know, it's not going to burn down, Dana, I promise you.
You know, the firemen that need.
Yes, I know, I understand that. So as you can see, like, we've got some healthy money in the elementaries that we can invest into these schools. In my opinion, which I probably shouldn't give, but you all need to sit down with these numbers, this data, right, these students, and say to yourselves, like, okay, if we only had X amount, where do we invest it and where do we go? I'm with you 100%, no matter where you all decide to go and you taxpayers decide to go. I'm gonna, you know, dive in and do the best I can on our end to fix up everything to the best of our abilities and give you all the best possible product that we can give you for the money that we can allot. That's about all I got.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's great.
So, Greg, could I just ask this? I know you weren't asked to speak specifically to Leland and Gray.
So I'm wondering right now whether people can really hear you. Could you hear less now? Emily's shaking her head. So I don't know how you want to do this. Do you want me to bring the?
I could hear, but it wasn't anywhere near as loud as.
Might just come to the speaker's platform if you want to talk.
Just thinking in relation to Leland and Gray, one of the board members pointed out there was an engineer's report in December of 2020 about this building that was very comprehensive, and I think that's something we probably need to pull up and make more accessible on the website for folks. The life expectancy of the building, as I recall, was something in the neighborhood of 15 years if that maintenance was conducted. I guess the biggest problem has something to do with columns and some leakage from columns and so on. I'm happy to speak to that. Yeah. Extensive knowledge of this. I went back, if you would like to go back, I believe it is the November or December of 2019 video. If you go back to that video and watch it, that gentleman never makes a date. He never, that is another one of those urban myths that I came up here and everyone told me that Leland and Gray was going to cave in and it was falling under, you know. So what happened with the columns? The columns got water in the columns. So what happened is they're steel columns wrapped in concrete, wrapped with a little insulation and a steel liner. So that's what that is that you see right here, a handful of in this room. Now when the water got in there, what happened was the insulation liner that's in there started to swell up, and what happened was then the water popped through the little steel outer liner. The gentleman said in there, it does not affect the stability of the columns or the strength of the columns in any way, shape, or form. It came through the roof, so it really affected columns mostly on A level only. And basically you could box them in, they're just going to be an eyesore, was what he said in the board meeting that I watched. As for the stress cracks in the floor, again, his statement on that was the I-beams used in this building to support the floor meet code. They are within code. They provide a little more deflection than he would have chosen, but they are well within code. So again, the easy answer to that is you're basically a carpet building. Put carpet in your hallways and you won't see cracked floor tiles. And you know, you're carpet extracting anyways. So there's some stress cracks in the basement that are horizontal cracks, not vertical cracks, which again just says that it's a sandy surface, you've had some settling, and that's what those were. So I was pleasantly surprised to watch that video and to hear what he had to say. I spoke with him directly. He kind of reiterated that. I'm not sure where the 5 or 10 or 15 year number came from. But we are not maintaining this building currently thinking that in 5 to 10 years it will not be in use. I personally view this building as the heart of West River Ed, and I think that we need to invest in it and maintain it and care for it
as if it was just that. And I think that that will build the morale that will make kids want to be a part of it.
Maybe I misrepresented that, Greg.
You're okay.
I kind of meant to basically come up with the same conclusions as you, that the building does have a good life expectancy ahead of it. He did throw out some numbers about, thinking longer range.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the site limitations and so on. But we'll see that gets posted out on the website, because that'd be good viewing for folks. Certainly for anyone who has a concern about the viability of this structure.
Absolutely. Questions?
All right. Great job.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
You guys all have a wonderful
Great
evening.
info.
You too. Thanks, Greg. All right, I think we're good, right? Well said.
Yeah, so, I think the challenge here is now to take the information that's going to come back to the board in August and to start delving into that more deeply and moving towards some decisions and time to have those hard conversations.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.